Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we're breaking down all of the SEC football action in Week 11 from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about the Texas A&M Aggies visiting the Ole Miss Rebels. This game's being played on Saturday, November 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, or 6 p.m. local time. That game's going to be at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium in Oxford, Mississippi, and it's going to be televised on ESPN. From a betting perspective, this game opened with the Aggies as a 1-point road favorite. And that line has grown a little bit as the week's gone on. Texas A&M is now favored by 2.5. Over-under opened at 58.5, and it has dropped a bit to 57. Bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, this might actually be the best, most competitive SEC game of Week 11, right?
My point is a lot can change in college football over 2 months. Whatever you think is going to happen now, especially in this season, this is a great example of the fact that these teams can change. So we'll see if either of these teams kind of changes their current trajectory in this matchup. But why don't you get us into the weather, injuries, and news and notes?
Sure. So let's start with the weather, Christopher. In Oxford on Saturday evening, it'd be a little bit of a cold one in the low 40s temperature-wise at kickoff. And we may drop into even the upper 30s by the time this one's over. Good news is it's going to be clear, not much precipitation in the forecast, and the wind's going to be pretty calm, 3 to 5 miles per hour. On the injury side of things, let's start with Texas A&M. Safeties Brian Williams and Keldrick Carper are both questionable for this game. And the guy that everybody's sort of watching coming in this one, if you watched Texas A&M last week, is quarterback Zach Calzada. I think they're hopeful that he'll play this week and hopefully be close to 100%, as close as he can be. On the Ole Miss side, this is a group that has been beat up for the last several weeks now, but they've been getting a little bit healthier in some spots. Let me run through some of the names to watch on Saturday. Wide receiver Braylon Sanders played 23 snaps against Liberty, which was an improvement. They had been without him for a little while there, but still, he was limited, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets a full go now that they're back into conference play this week. Also, guard Caleb Warren played the entire game last week, which was good news for them. He had been out as well. Wide receiver Jonathan Mingo remains out. Quarterback Matt Corral apparently isn't practicing this week, but that makes sense if you watch the way he sort of gutted through the last couple of games with a bum ankle and some other injuries that have been bothering him. And then we've also got wide receiver Dontario Drummond questionable for the game. Defensive end Sam Williams is also in and out of last week's game in the second half. So we'll just have to see what the prognosis is coming into kickoff for him as well. Getting over to the news and notes, let's start with A&M and where they're at. Christopher, you sort of alluded to how teams can look different at one point of the year to another. And I think these two teams typify this. A&M is a team that we opened the season with college football playoff aspirations. Some of us were predicting it. I won't call out who it was in the national media, but there were several people who really liked them. And they swooned at times, found themselves, beat Alabama. And now we're looking at a team that seems to be healthy again on the defensive side of the ball, and it's starting to show. They beat Auburn 20-3. And their defense is peaking and looking like, they could be on their way to their third win against a top 15 opponent this season. So you mentioned it. How do they look in November? Much more like the team that we thought they would be at the beginning of the season, which brings me to Lane Kiffin's team and where they're at in this point of the season. Early on in the season, they looked like they couldn't be beat. The offense was scoring at will, and they ran into some injuries. We ran off the list there of wide receivers that Matt Corral has lost or is in the process of getting back. It's really hard to know exactly where they're at in that process, because when they're healthy, we know they're good. But last week against Liberty, they really weren't tested too much in terms of what the offense could do. They jumped out to a 24-0 lead at half and sort of pulled everything off. Didn't push Matt Corral that much to run like he has been in games like, I think he ran like 30 times against Tennessee. Didn't really have to run against Liberty, which was a good thing. He's trying to get healthy, right? But I would point out that as we watch this game and you're watching Matt Corral and you're watching his health, this is a guy that it was reported that there were 21 NFL scouts in attendance for that Liberty game. Of course, Malik Willis is also the Liberty quarterback, former Auburn guy, somebody that NFL is interested in. But this is a guy that's the only Corral is the only FBS player with more than 2,500 passing yards and 500 rushing yards. NFL's breathing down his back. This is a guy that they're going to want to keep healthy, and this is the guy that, make no mistake about it, he makes this Ole Miss team go. So when you're trying to pick between these two teams and where they're at, Christopher, what are we seeing in this one?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Ole Miss results to date in the season, they're 7-2, And I think the loss, some people were disappointed with the loss to Auburn if you're a Rebels fan, but I think we could see that coming for a number of reasons. The spot, the health of the team, the matchup. So you look at what's left. They have Texas A&M, Vandy, and Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving. So I think you're going to beat Vanderbilt if you're Ole Miss. So that's 8 wins. I think 9-3 would be a pretty solid season that Rebels fans would be happy with. I know there was some pretty high expectations coming into the year, but to be 9-3, you've got to beat either Texas A&M or Mississippi State. Both of those teams are playing really well right now. So I think it's a big game for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, just in terms of the narrative around their season. Start with the offensive line for Ole Miss. They have one guard that's out for the season, and then they have another guard and a center who played last week, but are both dealing with injuries and are not 100%. They finally got Braylon Sanders back. He maybe is about 75%. They are now relying on John Rice Plumlee, who I love, who led the SEC in rushing as a freshman. Well, now he's a slot receiver and not a very good one in terms of the technical aspects of actually catching the football. And, it doesn't help that your quarterback is not practicing during the week and getting reps with these new receivers who aren't used to getting time because they're backups. So, you're kind of relying on a former walk-on and a former quarterback at receiver right now. And you're not going to be able to run the ball on A&M very easily, especially not when they're probably going to play run first on defense, and they just played Auburn really well under a similar circumstance. So I'm not sure how much Ole Miss can do against a pretty elite defense with all these injuries right now on offense. And on the other side of the ball, Zach Calzada is one of the main reasons why Texas A&M looks much different today than they did early in the season in September. And the other big reason is the offensive line. But their running game right now is doing very, very well. And with Calzada maybe less than 100% right now, and an Ole Miss scheme and personnel that doesn't really bode well toward defending the run, I don't expect A&M to take a lot of chances downfield in this game. Maybe one of their best targets in Jalen Watermeyer at tight end, he had like 3 or 4 drops last week. So hurt quarterback, receivers not playing like especially well right now for A&M. And they're in a matchup where they're going to run the ball and probably run the ball as long as they want to against a team that probably won't score that many points against them. So with that being said, Nick, who are you betting on in this game and why?
Well, Christopher, before I tell you my pick for this game, I want to make an announcement for Southeastern 14 that we are now in an official partnership with Action 24/7 Sportsbook. And because of that, I've got a sweet deal for you that you might want to use on betting this game. For new customers, and a limited time only on this deal, you can get your deposit matched 100% up to $800. So you deposit $800, you get $800 from Action 24/7. Pretty cool deal. You sign up today, make your first deposit using code. This is important. Using the code South14. That's South14, and Action will double the money up to $800. Download the app or visit action247.com to get started. This is by Tennesseans for Tennesseans. You got Action. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about my pick. Christopher, I like the Aggies in this game, actually, and I think they will win this outright. I'm comfortable laying the 2.5, even though they're a road favorite. And it's just about the way their defense is playing to me. This defense looks like a national championship type of defense. Unfortunately for Aggies fans, I don't think they have a national championship type of offense to go with it. But I think that the way that the Rebels are fighting their way through injuries, and they have a lot of guys that aren't 100%, you sort of ran through it a little bit there. I like taking the Aggies in this one. And I also like the under 57 because of that. I talk about Lane Kiffin unders are my new thing, and they continue to hit, right? I used to like Lane Kiffin overs. Now I'm a Lane Kiffin under guy. I think it's more about the health of his offense. But when you combine that with the stingy Aggies defense, I like us keeping this under 57. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm with you on Texas A&M minus 2.5 and under 57. My question in my mind is just trying to figure out which of them do I like more. You mentioned the Ole Miss unders, by the way. They are currently 4 consecutive cashes on those. So just looking it up. So, I mean, that's a pretty strong trend right there. And it's not just that it's a trend, there's reasons for it, right? There's reasons leading to that. So I think right now I probably like the under 57 a little bit more than I like the side. So I'll probably go with that in the bet that I actually make in this game. For Nicole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.